Hey everyone, FinTech here. So Polkadot may be the most exciting crypto or even software project in general of the last few years. And with the coin's price coming off one of its lowest points in recent months, there may be substantial upside in the short term. But this video won't be focusing on the short term. Instead, we're going to be looking at how you could retire on Polkadot by 2032. And we're going to go over a couple different ways to do it. First, I'm going to go over what Polkadot is and what makes it unique from other crypto projects. Then we'll get into several different ways of making passive income in DOT and some more active ways you can potentially make much higher returns with a little effort. And finally, I'll show you how either of these two methods could let you retire in as little as 10 years. So let's not waste any time and let's start with talking about what Polkadot even is. While most cryptocurrencies run on their own blockchains like Bitcoin or Ether on the Ethereum network, Polkadot allows other crypto projects to run on top of their chain. This means that unlike most blockchains which quickly get outdated, Polkadot is effectively future-proof. Unlike this guy who thought the internet would never be bigger than Nirvana. But Polkadot's unique features have deep roots in Polkadot's history and even tie back to the advent of blockchains in general. So let me tell you a story. After the launch of Bitcoin, it took a few years for people to really get their head around why it was useful. But eventually, they realized having a decentralized way of exchanging money without the need for a central bank or government could be super useful. This led to new innovations like the Ethereum blockchain, which took things one step further by adding smart contract capabilities to the blockchain. Conceived in 2013 by a young programmer named Vitalik Buterin and finally built in 2015 by a team of developers, Ethereum's smart contracts made blockchains useful for applications, also called dApps. These powered everything from NFTs to video games running on the chain. But while Ethereum had very lofty goals at launch, they suffered from the network being relatively slow and lacking in certain features like the ability to make rapid improvements. They pledged to launch Ethereum 2.0 to fix these issues, but if you look at the chain today, most of these features are just now being implemented 7 years later. One of the lead technical figures behind building Ethereum was a PhD named Gavin Wood. Gavin was frustrated with Ethereum's limitations and lack of technical progress, so much so that he eventually ended up leaving the Ethereum project altogether. In 2016, Gavin sat down and wrote a white paper detailing a new blockchain model, one that wouldn't suffer from the same limitations as Ethereum. And from that 21-page document, Polkadot was born. There were three major benefits Polkadot offered over Ethereum. Number one, it was sustainable. So unlike Ethereum or Bitcoin, which uses more electricity than a small country, Polkadot would use a new method of blockchain validation known as proof of stake, which was way less energy intensive. Number two, it had to be interoperable with other blockchains, so they could connect to Polkadot chains and assets could be swapped back and forth across chains. This is actually going to be important for one of our strategies to make money with Polkadot later on. And number three, and most importantly, it had to be upgradable. Unlike Ethereum, it couldn't take years to add new features. There needed to be a way to incentivize people to continually improve the chain. And this is going to be the most important area of Polkadot for investors to understand. The way Gavin Wood achieved both interoperability and upgradability on Polkadot was to use a concept known as parachains. No, not perichains, parachains. Parachains are essentially blockchains that would run on top of the Polkadot network. So if a developer wanted to launch a new blockchain network, they could use Polkadot's built-in security and have a ready-made user base there for them. Polkadot, meanwhile, benefits from new parachains bringing new features to the network, accomplishing Wood's vision of an upgradable crypto. But not just anyone could go in and start adding parachains to the network. Gavin also came up with a system that used economic incentives to ensure only the best projects were added. That system was parachain auctions. These auctions would be held every week and would allow the entire Polkadot community to bid on which project they wanted to see added. Whichever project raised the most DOT tokens at the end of the week would get added to Polkadot. So if you wanted to, you could log in to parachains.info right now and look at the current auction and vote with your own DOT tokens for who you want to win. Kind of like how on Twitter, whoever gets the most votes is right, I think. I don't really use Twitter. And to incentivize people into actually loaning out their DOT for each parachain, Polkadot allows parachain winners to give out rewards to anyone who backed them in what's known as a crowd loan. So for example, if we look at this parachain, Akala, which won an earlier auction in December, people who backed this parachain were given 4.61 ACA for every DOT they contributed. Their DOT tokens are then locked up for 2 years during Akala's slot lease, and at the end of the lease, you get your DOT back. So essentially, you are given free money in the form of ACA tokens in exchange for locking up your DOT tokens for up to 2 years. And in certain cases, this can be an extremely profitable prospect. People who backed Clover Finance, for example, made a 200% return basically overnight. Clover won Polkadot's 5th Parachain auction, raising $162 million in DOT support, and its over 5,000 contributors were then rewarded with Clover token, which immediately spiked in price before selling off over time. So that's one way to make quick but inconsistent returns with Polkadot, and that will tie in with our retirement strategy later in the video. But if you're smart about it, Polkadot also provides one of the best passive investments of any crypto out there. Polkadot uses a proof of stake model to secure the network, rather than the proof of work model used by chains such as Bitcoin. This means instead of miners using rows and rows of high-powered GPUs to mine new blocks, Polkadot holders can give their DOT tokens to a validator who validates transactions on the network. Currently, Polkadot staking is paying out a rate of 14% if you stake with a validator. You can earn slightly higher rates by operating your own validator node, but that does require some technical expertise, and I would not recommend it if you don't know what you're doing. So 14% will be the rate most people see. But it is important to note that Polkadot is an inflationary coin, meaning more DOT tokens are constantly being created. Right now, inflation is a little over 8%, and that will drop a little bit over time, but that means your adjusted rate on staking is closer to 5.85% for delegated staking after accounting for inflation. So now we've gone over 2 ways to make money with Polkadot, but how does that help you retire in 10 years? Well, first, let's figure out how much we need to retire in 10 years using the staking rate I just mentioned, but then after that, I'm also going to mention some slightly more complicated techniques that could increase your rate of return by nearly 4 times the base staking rate a little later in the video. So first, we have to define what we mean by retirement. To me, retirement means you have enough money to cover your expenses for the rest of your life. Seems like a fair definition. So step 1 is determining what are my expenses. Now, I live in the US, so average expenses in other areas of the world are going to vary pretty dramatically, but you can just plug your own numbers into everything I'm going to go over. According to NerdWallet, the average monthly budget for a single person in the US is $3,189, which is actually very close to my personal budget, so let's just say $3,200. So how much money do I need invested in Polkadot to support $3,200 a month in expenses? Well, one way to look at it is to just calculate how much DOT you need staked to produce $3,200 a month in income. So since the DOT staking rate is currently 5.85% after inflation, you would need 12 months of $3,200 divided by 5.85%, or $656,000 worth of DOT being staked. That's nearly 30,000 DOT tokens. That's a lot of money, but we don't need that until 2032. So if we plug those numbers into a compound interest calculator, we can work backward to see what we need today. See, we only need $375,000 staked to retire in 10 years. Yeah, that's still a lot. So if we want to lower that number, we need to find a way to increase the amount of interest we earn on each of our DOT tokens. So let's now talk about 2 different ways we can do that. The first way is by strategically backing Parachain projects in their auctions. I already mentioned how Clover Finance let supporters triple their money. Well, there are other examples of this as well. On Kusama, which was Polkadot's canary chain, basically a test network for all of Polkadot's future functionality, early investors in Moon River made a 10x return when the Moon River token they were given spiked in value following its launch. There was an article by James Agenda on holdpolkadot.com where the author broke down the return he made from staking on Kusama versus participating in a crowd loan. And Kusama, again, is just an early version of Polkadot used to test features of the blockchain before rolling them out on Polkadot. I won't go into crazy detail since you can read the article, but ultimately James ended up making 410% more via crowd loans than he did from staking Kusama directly. That's almost enough to cover the cost of adding guacamole to a Chipotle burrito. Just kidding, I'll never be that rich. Now, getting consistent returns this way will require you to take an active approach to supporting Parachain projects, and you do need to remember that any DOT tokens you loan to a Parachain project will be locked for 2 years. So you will not be able to stake them or earn interest on them during that time. Or will you? The way Polkadot was designed in the beginning was you had to sacrifice to support projects you liked. While you were rewarded if they won a Parachain slot, you were then forced to hodl for 2 years without any chance of earning staking rewards during that time, which today would be an opportunity cost of 28% of the value of your Polkadot during that time. It's 28% because it's 2 years worth of staking rewards that you're missing out on. But that isn't necessarily true anymore. The great thing about Polkadot is is it's designed to support change, and they have changed dramatically over the past year. The first ever auction winner on Polkadot was a project called Akala, which introduced a trustless staking derivative of the DOT token. That might not sound that exciting, but it changes the whole economics of Polkadot. See, you could contribute to a crowd loan to support a specific Parachain project. That's just the name given to the crowdsourced fundraising in support of a project. And you can do that by going directly through Polkadot. Or you can contribute to a crowd loan by first going through Akala. Akala will then pass your DOT tokens to the Parachain you want to support, but it will also issue you an equivalent amount of LC DOT, which is redeemable for 1 DOT token in 2 years once the lease expires. This means that while your DOT tokens are still locked up, you maintain some liquidity in the form of your LC DOT. Now, LC DOT is not as valuable as DOT, because if you think about it, why would I give you 1 DOT in exchange for an LC DOT, which lets me get 1 DOT back in 2 years from now? There's an opportunity cost to not having the DOT token available for 2 years. So LC DOT generally trades at around 75% the value of a DOT token when you first receive it, and then its value goes up closer to when you can redeem it. It's basically an IOU, only unlike the ones your uncle gives you, you'll actually get paid back in 2 years. There's a few things you could do with LC DOT. You could trade it for more DOT tokens right away. You'll lose 25% of your value due to the price difference between the tokens, and once you've given up the LC DOT, you'll never get your original DOT tokens back. But let's say there's a really interesting crowd loan you want to get in on, having that extra liquidity could make you a 100% return in a few days, so it might be worth it to you. You can also trade LC DOT for AUSD, which is a stablecoin issued by Akala that's pegged to the US dollar. This basically gives you the cash value of your LC DOT and could be used to transfer to a different network or buy a different crypto if you want it. Another option is you could contribute your LC DOT to a liquidity pool on Akala, which should earn you around 7% APY on your tokens. Plus, since you're just lending them, you don't lose the option to trade that LC DOT in after 2 years for your original DOT tokens back. This is a really good option since you're making money from winning the crowd loan and you make up to 7% on your LC DOT, at least keeping up with Polkadot's inflation rate during that time. But there's one more option, and it will pay out an even higher rate than contributing to a liquidity pool. So to fund our hypothetical retirement, we're going to swap our LC DOT for ACA, Akala's native token. Now again, once we do this, we lose the right to redeem our LC DOT for our original DOT in the future. So what we're left with is our rewards from winning the original crowd loan and now a bunch of ACA. What next? Well, we could put the ACA into a liquidity pool and again make a few percent. But the highest return I could find anywhere for the Akala token is locked staking on Binance. And if you watched my video on Solana, this may sound familiar. Right now, Binance is paying out an over 27% APY if you lock your ACA tokens with them for at least 90 days at a time. That is a crazy high rate, but a couple caveats here. Number one, this is not staking. This is you giving Binance your tokens and then they lend them out to other people. So it requires you to put your faith in Binance that they won't disappear with your tokens. Number two, you need to relock every 90 days to make the APY, and locked staking is also not available in Binance.us, only in Binance.com. But we've now dramatically improved our yearly return on DOT. We make a one-time return on the crowd loan rewards for supporting a Parachain project, and then we also earn 27% per year from the LC DOT we converted to ACA tokens. This could average to well over a 100% return per year, depending on which crowd loans we end up winning. But let's just be ultra conservative and use a 30% rate as our yearly return on our original DOT to figure out how much we need invested to retire in 10 years. And it's probably less than you think. So I still need enough DOT to cover $3,200 in expenses per month. At a 30% APY, that's $128,000 worth of DOT throwing off income. So how much DOT would you need invested today to reach $128,000 10 years from now? Well, if we again plug the numbers into a compound interest calculator, it turns out you would only need $9,500 invested at a 30% return to pass $128,000 invested 10 years from now. That comes out to just 432 DOT tokens today. Now, there are some pretty big assumptions in there. Will our expenses be the same in 10 years? Will Binance keep paying out 27% APY? Will we always pick really profitable crowd loans? Maybe not. But this does show that crypto doesn't have to be a crazy speculative asset to be a good investment. See, this also assumed that Polkadot's price never even increased, which is another assumption that is probably not true. Personally, I wouldn't plan on only using DOT as my retirement plan, but after making this video, I am going to be putting some money there to participate in some crowd loans. So if you weren't aware of some of these methods to make money with Polkadot, these might be good options for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.